It is Saturday, and I am sitting here excited and reflective on what I just accomplished. And I want to talk a little bit about this idea around leadership voice. I just wrapped up a course in which I recorded all my videos around it and it'll be ready to launch next week. But today, I just felt powerful about this topic and wanted to share it with a wider group versus just keeping it all to myself. So I want to talk to you all about leadership voice. So as an organizational culture consultant, which roots their work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, helping you create workplace cultures where leadership's not afraid, teams thrive, and employees feel engaged. Voice is such a powerful perspective that comes up all the time when I'm talking to my different clients that they want to change. And recently I was like, I'm going to be more intentional in this experience. Often that question comes up in two ways. From a leadership perspective, it's like, I keep telling my staff that we want to hear from them, that it's okay to, um, share your voice, that you have good ideas, that it's important that we hear from you. And then on the flip side, what I hear from employees is this idea of how do I create change in my workplace when I don't have any leadership power or responsibility. So, kind of two sides of the same coin to which both leadership, folks who are in senior level positions, as well as employees who really are trying to figure out like, how do we have more voice in the space? How do we have more ideas in the space? What are the ways in which voices can be shared? As someone who works in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion, voice really becomes a key piece when we think about this idea of inclusion, right? When we are able to share our ideas, our thoughts, and we feel good in a space, right? Typically when we're feeling good, we feel like we belong, we feel like we should be in a place, like we don't hesitate at all to share ideas, to ask a question of somebody else. Shoot, when you feeling really good, you might even challenge somebody else's idea. And so voice becomes important. And then on the flip side, when we don't feel as if we belong, or people feel like make us feel as if we're excluded, our voice often becomes silence and we don't say as much. Or we think about even how to use our voice or if our voice should be in that space. And so this becomes such a major concern. And I want to talk about it from all the perspectives when I'm thinking about, and I say that, you know, organizational culture change and diversity, equity, inclusion, and workplace cultures to improve the employee experience. That employee experience relates to everyone. So whether it be leaderships, teams, and individual employees, how do we create change so that people feel better? And so one of the things is the idea of voice and inclusion. And it solves the problem because if you've ever led a team or you be sitting in the top head of the table because somehow you the leader and you in charge, and you ask a question and then there's like silence. And you're like, dude, I really need somebody to engage because I'm trying to generate some ideas about this topic. And I want to see what's out there so we can move forward. And so that's important, right? And then if you're part of the team, you probably sitting there like, well, who's going to speak up and who's going to say something and whose voice is more powerful? And if I say something, is it even going to matter? And people are thinking about team dynamics and they are in relation to other people in that space. Who are they in relation to those folks who are within leadership? Who are they in relationship to their colleagues, right? If I speak up in this space and I say something in a team or group setting, how might that impact or come back to me at a later date and time? So that's important to know. And then just individually, right? When we are sitting with our own self-reflection and employees are thinking about who they are individually, they're trying to figure out what all the experiences are that they've had with their voice and where their voice has been treasured and valued. And when that voice has been like, go to the wayside. So you can see from that extent, when we think about voice, it has different implications depending upon who's thinking about the voice, who wants the voice to be shared, and how that voice is to be shared. From a leadership perspective, the use of multiple voices will help create diverse perspectives. Y'all hate these glasses. They always falling down. Anybody else got a struggle where you wear glasses and they just be falling off your face all the time? Yeah, that'd be my real journey. But my point is, right, we all have different places in which we have to think about like in terms of like leadership and what that means for us and how we go about changing that. And so from a leader's perspective, right, it's hard being a leader and being the only person having to think about things and how you make decisions and what those decisions look like and why it's important for people to contribute and to share their voice. And no matter how much you say as a leader that like, hey, I want to hear your voice, it's important to me, share what how you feel, an employee may or may not necessarily do that. When I was supervising, I would always tell people the difference, right? So I would recognize, right, like when we are in a group or team meeting, there are certain things that I would or would not say in a certain way. But individually, I might be able to be more nuanced in my communication and how I carry things out. So we really have to think about voice not just in isolation as a single idea, as single employees, as you know, is this employee using their voice and what impact does that have? I really want to encourage you to think about voice in terms of a collective experience, right? Collectively, what is the voice? And the reason that's important because from a lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, if we are going to create change, we have to move beyond these individual pieces. This often will show up when you have one person who's really passionate about an idea and they're consistently talking about it. But that's like one voice. And that voice may or may not have the ability to have impact and to influence others. But if you take that one voice and you add it to another, and there's multiple voices, those voices resonate much louder. They have different types of impact, right? And then also because there's a diversity of voices that those people can engage and interact with each other and identify nuances and other pathways in terms of how they amplify their voice and how they share their voice. I was sharing with someone how like sometimes in meetings, one or two people saying something, it matters. But then, when you have the collective group that's in agreement, it matters even more. And so from a leadership standpoint and perspective, how do you get to a place where you can include multiple voices, where you're saying that it's possible, but it's really about that process and what you might do when you are engaging, interacting with your employees on how you bring that voice forward and you make great things happen. You really have to be willing to say, hey, I want to hear from you, and then incorporate different processes, different questions, different ways in which you facilitate into that overall space. What's really cool about what I love about teams is that you can have multiple people be responsible. So it doesn't just all fall on the person who's leading, the senior leader in that space. It can relate to other people, right? And so, what better way to demonstrate that you want multiple voices in the space than sharing power and allow multiple voices in that space to facilitate, to engage and encourage and empower colleagues and one another, and also to hold space for you as leadership. That's key and important. The other thing I want to talk about and think about with voice is that we often think about getting employee feedback. We do a lot of this through surveys, which are good, but is that really representative of the employee's voice and how they're feeling? It is in terms of a snapshot in time, but is it over time, right? So that could be maybe a quick story that they're sharing, but that's the voice. I like to resonate and think about like people and how like I can have a conversation with you one time, but that don't mean I know you. I don't even understand you. I don't know if you've had this moment where you might have engaged with somebody and then another time you talk to them, you're like, I don't even know if this is the same person. Because depending upon what season or what energy they were bringing at the time that you engaged and interacted with them, that's who you got. But it may be different when you engage and interact with that person in another space. And so it's important to not use one isolated incident in which we collect employees' feedback or understandings or opinions as this idea that somehow that's the employee voice. Because it's a snapshot in time. If I was to get to know you as a person, I wouldn't know you as a person because I spoke to you one time. I would know you as a person over time. And so when I think about voice, it's really trying to get you to understand like who is the individual, who are the employees, what is the employee voice? Because if I was to get to know you personally over time, if somebody was to tell me that you said something, I'd be like, no, that's not what they said because I know their voice. And so we want to get to the place where we fully understand our employee's voice as well and recognize that this one moment in time is not going to give us what it is that we think it's going to give us. And the last thing I just want to consider when we're talking about voice, right? So we want employees to use their voice. We're talking to employees. We say, your voice is welcome. Come talk to me. Share your opinion. But our structures and designs around that feedback is set in such a way to where we say, we only want your voice in this way, in this capacity, answering these questions. We want you to give voice on that. But what if an employee don't got an opinion about that or could give voice to that? Then that leaves that out. And so it really causes us to shift and think about different ways in which we collect employee voice, employee feedback, and whatnot. And one of the ways we do that is when we really think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we think about diversity in terms of difference and variety, where we get a variety of different ways in which we might collect that information and get feedback. When we think about who we're collecting feedback from, and are we getting the collective employee voice? Because if it's all apples filling out the survey and you're trying to get information for both cucumbers and mangoes, it doesn't help if all you have is Apple's voice. That does not represent the employee experience. Gwyneth Paltrow might be real mad at me right now because I'm using Apple, but I like to keep things generic, so fruit. So that's important as you consider and think about your employee voice and that experience and how you go about doing that. And inclusion and equity, right? Like not everybody can sit down in a survey and that might be best. Like maybe their ideas is generated in community and collaboration with others. So I don't know, maybe you do some focus groups or some one-on-one conversations. The piece is you really need to diversify your approaches if you're really looking to understand the employee voice and really looking to build a culture of inclusion where you are using those employee voices. The other thing that I would just talk to you about is just kind of thinking about, maybe I'll do a follow-up live about this and go a little bit more detailed in terms of that, but just really thinking about mindset, right? And so if I've been told as an employee, if you tell employees or you tell your teams that you want to hear from them, but if their experience over time in your organization has been that their voice does not matter and that it does not need to be heard, and then all of a sudden on, July 22nd, you decide that you want to really highlight and communicate to the organization that voices matter, these employees have had a whole bunch of years and months and weeks in which their voices have been silenced. And so being able to believe that what leadership is saying right now, that they want to hear the voice, that's very limited. That might be hard for people, right? So it may be mindset. And so I want to talk about mindset from both an individual and an employee perspective, right? What do employees believe that they can do? I was talking to I can't think of her organizational strategist. She was chief organizational officer within the nonprofit she was a part of. And we were talking, she's like, we just keep telling them and we want to hear from them. And I don't understand why they're not sharing things. And I suggested that folks may not know that they can share. They may not believe it. So no matter what you say, it may not matter. And that belief, what we have to move beyond as an organization is we have to move beyond thinking that that is an individual and personal employee problem, because it is not. So when we think about our employees and we want to build them up, and we are looking for leaders and we want to build leaders from within, and we have these mentorship programs and whatnot, a key factor that we really have to think about and consider is mindset. You can give people all the tools, but if they don't believe that they can do it, they never will be able to. One of my favorite childhood stories is definitely the little engine that could. And I can't remember all the words, but it's like, I think, it's like, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. But there's another part that's like, if you think you can't, you won't. Right. And so if people believe that they can't use their voice, don't believe that they have agency to use their voice, don't believe that what they have to share is important in the organizational context, then they won't use their voice. And even though you as leaders may be saying that voice is important, what other ways are you saying that it's not? Are you encouraging employees in all aspects of the work that they do, or only in certain spaces? And if it's only in certain spaces, it again is centered within the organization from your lens and perspective, and it does not center the employee. It does not encourage them to give their voice. And they again feel as if it may not matter. So how do we shift and move people to where they feel their voice matters? And how do they get to that mindset? And some of that is centered around definitely helping people believe and just giving them the tools and equipment and resources to be successful, right? Like, understanding over time, you as a leader, I know for myself, as I've rose in different leadership positions within the organizations, I've gotten more savvy in terms of how I use my voice and understanding what spaces to use my voice and whether my voice is loud or whether my voice is quiet, right? And so our employees also need that understanding of when do I amplify my voice? When is this a single issue concern? I need to be extremely loud about it. And when is this an ongoing, consistent thing and it needs to relate to culture change, right? And so we really have to help develop mindset around folks using their voice, around folks being leaders within the workplace. If we can kind of pay attention to all these things of how we collect information, how we encourage employees to use their voice, how we show up in spaces, right? What it looks like for an individual versus a team, right? Versus leaders or those who are managing, we can really get to this place where we have more voice in our workplace, more diversity of ideas. We can really think about what might be inclusive pathways and practices because you're going to have a diversity of individuals sharing different things. And so then you'll be able to think about a wider range of concepts and ideas in order to enable action within your organizational culture. So this is just one thought and idea that I've had in terms of like around voice and whatnot. And like I said, it started because I was talking to clients and they were like, we need some more voice in the space. I said, all right, let's talk about that. And so I was incorporating that into my work anyway. And like I said, it's being super excited that I launched the course, impacting organizational change, finding your leadership voice. I got it out there right. And I'm excited for people to take it and to learn from it. And here on YouTube, I'll be doing a series of lives where I'll continue to kind of talk about voice in this season, kind of give you a series so you can understand how you incorporate that within your workplace over time, and how that's going to not only enhance your role as a leader, but it definitely is going to enhance organizational outcomes. So if you found this video helpful, please, 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 by all means, subscribe to my channel, gives it a thumbs up, and share it with somebody else. And regardless where you at, whatever you're doing, I hope that you always remember that you matter, regardless of who you are, where you are, and whatever you may be experiencing. Take care, you all.